Okay, but now to our first reading that discusses specific characteristics of an ethical business culture. Arditchvili, I apologize if I don't pronounce that name correctly, interviewed 54 business executives from a wide range of industries, and in addition also 13 academics. And he wanted to know, what is an ethical corporate culture? What differentiates an ethical corporate culture from an unethical one? To sum up the definition provided by Arditchvili, ethical cultures are based on the alignment between formal structures, processes, and policies, consistent ethical behavior of top leadership, and informal recognition of heroes, stories, rituals, and languages that inspire organizational members to behave in a manner consistent with ethical standards that have been set by the executive leadership team. In addition to providing this rather lengthy definition, through discussion with the business executives and the academics, Arditchvili also identified 5 characteristics of an ethical corporate culture. As you can see from the picture in my slide, in the center we have mission and vision driven. I would like to add values to that. We'll talk about that in just a second. Around the center we have stakeholder balance, leadership effectiveness, process integrity, and long-term perspective. While all of these characteristics affect each other, mission, vision, and values are the most important aspect that the leadership team can control. Now you may wonder, what are an organization's mission, vision, and values? And why are they that important? Well, the mission delineates a clear, concise, and specific description of an organization's purpose. In short, it tells us why the organization exists. An organization's vision presents what the organization wants to become and gives a direction for the organization's future. So the vision tells us where the organization wants to go. Finally, organization's values, similar to personal values we discussed in our last class, clarify how the organization will conduct its activities to achieve its mission and vision. The values are deeply integrated guiding principles that should never be compromised, not for short-term profits nor for convenience. In short, what is the organization willing to do to achieve its mission and vision? The values reflect common morality, frequently emphasize respect, dignity, trust, caring, excellence. So what does that mean to be mission, vision, and values driven now? Well, first and foremost, the organization has to have a clearly written mission, vision, and value statement. This seems to be a no-brainer, as most organizations today, good ones and bad ones, have a mission statement. Interesting fact, Volkswagen did not have an official mission, vision, and value statement until I think it was 2016 or 2018. It may be a coincidence, but if you remember the Dieselgate scandal, they did have some problems with unethical conduct at the very highest level. Anyway, you know what is more important than simply having a clear mission, vision, and value statement? It's making sure that the values are clearly communicated and institutionalized, that the mission and values are reflected in formalized ethical guidelines and behavior. As I said before, almost all organizations have a mission, vision, and value statement. But it's important that they are being promoted from the top down and that employees at all levels are not only aware of them, but that they are being held accountable for acting accordingly. That means that ethical violations have to have consequences, and that employees who continue to violate the organization's mission, vision, and values may need to be let go, regardless of their performance. So even top performers, if they don't achieve their performance according to the values outlined by the organization, there have to be consequences. On the other hand, employees who act according to the organization's values, especially in difficult situations, need to be praised and rewarded. When employees are promoted, the organization should not only care about employees' performance, but also check how the employee achieved it. Did his or her actions reflect the organization's values? In addition, the corporate values need to be sustained over long periods of time, and they cannot change every year or two. This will help to build relationships of trust and respect. Back to Volkswagen really quick. I'm not sure if you know, but after the Dieselgate scandal, they had to change their values again. That was about a year or two after they've been implemented. You should go and take a look at them if you have a minute or two. But enough about Volkswagen for now. Let's talk about British Petroleum, also known as BP. As you can see, they have a bright green logo. It almost looks like the sun is in the middle, surrounded by green nature. Do you think they have a mission, vision, and value statement? Of course they do. Let's see. Let's start with BP's values. On their homepage, they first say a few general things about their values. As our business transforms itself in step with the world we serve, our 5 values provide a fixed point of reference for the way we operate and behave. They focus our perspective's spirit of invention and purpose. Having one set of values and behaviors and clear explicit expectations in our code of conduct helps us make choices in consistent ways around the globe in many different contexts. Each section of the code is clear for everyone, wherever they work. Now, that was beautiful. Let's check on the values. Well, first, we have safety. Safety is good business. Everything we do relies upon the safety of our workforce and the communities around us. We care about the safe management of the environment. We are committed to safely delivering energy to the world. Next, BP lists respect. We respect the world in which we operate. It begins with compliance with laws and regulations. We hold ourselves to the highest ethical standards and behave in ways that earn the trust of others. We depend on the relationships we have and respect each other and those we work with. We value diversity of the people and thought. We care about the consequences of our decisions, large and small, on those around us. Now, the third value listed is excellence. We are in a hazardous business, and we are committed to excellence through the systematic and disciplined management of our operations. We follow and uphold the rules and standards we set for our company. We commit to quality outcomes, have a thirst to learn and improve. If something is not right, we correct it. Next on the list is courage. What we do is rarely easy. Achieving the best outcomes often requires the courage to face difficulty, to speak up and stand by what we believe. We always strive to do the right thing. we explore new ways of thinking and are unafraid to ask for help. We are honest with ourselves and actively seek feedback from others. We aim for an enduring legacy despite the short-term priorities of our world. So, the final value listed is one team. Whatever the strength of the individual, we will accomplish more together. We put the team ahead of our personal success and commit to building its capability. We trust each other to deliver on our respective obligations. I can honestly say that this is a very, very well written value statement. Let's briefly move on to the mission and vision before we analyze whether they actually live by them. So in their mission and vision they say something like, our purpose is reimagining energy for people and our planet. We want to help the world reach net zero and improve people's lives. We will aim to dramatically reduce carbon in our operations and in our production and grow new low-carbon businesses, products and services. We will advocate for fundamental and rapid progress towards the Paris Accord and strive to be a leader in transparency. We want to be an energy company with purpose, one that is trusted by society, valued by shareholders, and motivating for everyone who works at BP. So, what do you think? Does this sound a little too good to be true? I mean, it does not get much better than this. You may remember when I talked about personal values, that it's easy to stick to your personal values when everything is going smoothly. When everything is going well, there's not much of a problem. But a true test of our values happens when something is at stake, when we have to give something up for them. Crisis also challenge a firm's ethical beliefs and the level of its top management team conviction to them. Well, BP faced such a crisis in 2010. On April 20th, 2010, to be specific, so about 10 years ago, the Deepwater Horizon spill is considered to be the largest marine oil spill in history of the petroleum industry. Well, as far as we know, the Taylor offshore spill might actually be bigger now, since it started around 2004 and has been leaking ever since. And scientists are not even sure how much oil actually went in the ocean. But anyways, back to BP, to the BP oil spill. The United States government estimated that around 780 cubic meters of oil leaked before it was finally declared sealed in September of 2010. However, several reports still claim that the well site is leaking oil even today. After the investigation, the National Commission of the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill and offshore drilling concluded in the Chief Counsel report that the disaster was not, as some have suggested, a result of accidental alignment of disparate technical failures. While technical failures contributed to the blowout, the Chief Counsel's team traced each of them back to an overarching failure of management. In addition, it also said, and I quote here, the disaster happened because a number of separate risk factors, oversights and outright mistakes combined to overwhelm the safeguards meant to prevent such an event. The Chief Counsel's team identified a number of technical risk factors in the design, execution and testing of the well. The team was also able to trace all of these failures back to an overarching failure of management. Better management of personnel, risk and communications by BP and its contractors would almost certainly have prevented the blowout. It also named the following management failures. First, we have ineffective leadership at critical times, ineffective communication and siloing of information, failure to provide timely procedures, poor training and supervision of employees, ineffective oversight of contractors, inadequate use of technology, and failure to appropriately analyze and appreciate risk. Now, let's go back to BP's values: safety, courage, respect, excellence, and one team. I think this is one of the best examples of how important it is that an organization does not simply have a mission, vision, and value statement, but that the organization is driven by it, that it lives by it. Again, if BP would have lived by their values, none of this would have happened. Now, you may wonder what happened to BP in the end. Well, in 2012, BP pleaded guilty to 11 counts of manslaughter, 2 misdemeanors, and a felony count of lying to Congress. And in addition, in 2014, a judge found that BP was primarily responsible for the oil spill, and as a result of its deliberate misconduct and gross negligence. And BP settled for $18.7 billion in addition to the $28 billion it had already paid out in claims and cleanup costs. So overall, these management failures cost BP around $65 billion. I would also like to highlight a few employee comments that were listed in the report. It was always understood that you could get fired if you raised safety concerns that might delay drilling. Drilling priorities taking precedence over plant maintenance. When I first started working, they didn't care whether they killed you or not. If you got hurt, they just pushed you to the side and put somebody else in. And then we have Tony Hayward, BP CEO at the time. And when he was asked, how did the disaster affect him personally? Guess what he said? He said, well, I would like my life back too. This seems like a horrible organization to work for. Imagine 11 people die and the CEO says, I want my life back too. But we'll talk about organizational change in just a minute. I hope you understand now how important it is for an organization to be mission, vision, and values driven. And since I spent so much time on it, I also hope you know how much I care about it. So you really should listen to it twice if you have any concerns. The next characteristic of an ethical corporate culture, Arditashvili discussed, is called stakeholder balance. Edward Freeman defines a stakeholder as any group or individual who can affect or is affected by the achievement of the organization's objectives. To create a balance between stakeholders suggests that there's tension between multiple stakeholders. Focusing too long and too much on any one stakeholder has the potential to create an imbalance that can lead to ethical problems. For example, many organizations focus too much on shareholder at cost of customers, employees, and suppliers. Stakeholder balance does not fully remove the tension between the stakeholders. To create stakeholder balance means that the organization is aware of how the operations affect their stakeholders, such as customers, employees, shareholders, suppliers, the community, governments, anybody who is affected by or affects the organization. An organization then needs to ensure that it consistently balances all stakeholder claims and deals with them on an ethical and value-oriented basis. That requires organizations to create a good balance of customer value and profits. It also means that organizations have to give back to the community in which they do business in order to be a good corporate citizen in a global economy. And the respectful treatment and fair compensation for employees at all levels, not just at the executive level. If you're interested in how to create a stakeholder balance, you need to watch my next video on CSR. So let's move on and talk about process integrity, which is the next characteristic of an ethical organizational climate. If you paid close attention on my first video, you may remember that we already talked about the fairness and transparency of the process when we covered procedural justice, a deontological approach. Remember, fair treatment has to be based on impartial and consistently applied rules in order to generate an unbiased decision. If that does not ring a bell, you can always go back and watch the video again. Very similar, Arditashvili said that process integrity of recruiting, hiring, firing, evaluating, compensating, promoting, communicating, and so on consists of 4 important aspects. First, dedication to quality and fairness in its people, processes, and products. This seems to be pretty self-explanatory. It requires an investment in ongoing ethics training, communications throughout the organization, and transparent decision making. Second, corporate governance processes supported by board quality and board independence. I would like to briefly talk about what board quality and board independence actually means. In theory, the board of directors is responsible to the shareholders and is supposed to govern a company's management to make sure that the organization's executives work in the best interest of the shareholders. But typically, the chief executive officer, the CEO, is also at the same time the chair of the board. Well, executive compensation illustrates some of the problems board of directors face. Guess who decides how much the CEO should make? Well, if you guessed a subcommittee of the board of directors, you're correct. And who was again in charge of the board as a whole? The CEO. So the CEO is in charge of the board decides how much the CEO makes. Some of the things to look out for when assessing the quality of the board of directors are size. Size matters. How big is the board? A small board might not be able to have the required expertise to function properly. Don't forget, board members aren't employees, they're independent, and they usually have other responsibilities too, such as running their own company. Consequently, they have limited time to fulfill their board duties. In addition, it matters who is on the board. Are there enough independent outsiders and experienced business leaders who have no direct connection to the company? Red flags would include relatives of a current executive. Pay special attention to the 4 most important board committees, such as the executive committee, audit, compensation, and nominating committee. Are they structured properly to work effectively? Finally, look at transactions between the organization, the executives, and directors, and see if anything raises any red flags by suggesting conflict of interest or other problems. Third, values are reinforced in performance appraisals, promotions, and everyday execution. And fourth, the mission is internalized in the company processes and behaviors. We already talked about these 2 points a few minutes ago when we discussed what it means to be mission, vision, and values driven. Again, if you can't quite remember it, feel free to rewind. So, the next characteristic discussed by Art de Willy was long-term perspective. It sounds almost obvious, but organizations face a lot of pressure to achieve short-term goals today. I'm not even talking about the annual report. I'm talking about quarterly reports that are used to judge executives' performance. How can a CEO ensure a long-term perspective when he or she is judged on whether he or she reached the quarterly numbers? You may even wonder what exactly are short-term and long-term goals. Well, short-term goals focus on how well the processes, procedures, and programs have been implemented in the past. Hence, focusing on achieving short-term goals means that you make small adjustments to past decisions. Long-term goals, on the other hand, are strategic goals that shape the overall direction of the organization. It requires a properly implemented mission that explains the purpose of the organization and, of course, a vision that guides the organization in the right direction. A long-term perspective needs to connect environmental sustainability, social responsibility, and profits. So, we have leadership effectiveness. As I mentioned earlier, an ethical culture starts at the top and is conveyed by example. The CEO and senior management team have to live their lives with great personal integrity. Leaders cannot just talk the talk, but they need to walk the talk. They need to lead by example and do what they say. They also need to demand ethical conduct at every level of the company. Remember, I also said that when I talked about mission, vision, and values driven. Finally, when ethical issues arise, the CEO cannot simply shoot the messenger, but has to gather the facts and make informed decisions. We will talk about ethical leadership in a moment in a lot more detail. So that's it with regards to Art de Willy's 5 characteristics of an ethical corporate culture.